there, his wake was made totally illegal. It wasn't meant to happen. This, what happened here, it wasn't meant to happen. This church wasn't here at the time. This was, the whole church was demolished and refurbished in 1857, I believe it was. I think it was 1857. But there was a man here called Adam Hill, the Reverend Adam Hill. So I'm going to tell you a wee bit about him as well. So the Presbyterians of Ballinger, there was no meeting house here for the first, well, 16th and first half of 1700s, you know. They all went to Ballyclare, where there was Reformed Presbyterian Church and non-strict, so private Presbyterian Church. They're still there in the middle of the line. So, however, 1720 came, there was a big row between the people of Ballinger and the people of Ballyclare, and they basically split. The people from Ballinger here went to Rallow Presbyterian Church, but it was a bit too far. I think it was 7 or 9 miles up the road there. So they applied to the Presbyterian Senate, and they eventually said, yes, you can have a church here, and you can come under the Westminster Confession of Faith into the normal today's Presbyterian Church of Ireland. Sorry, Presbyterian Church in Ireland. So they now had a church. That was built, the first one was built in 1723, and it was probably just like a barn or a back of a house until 1757 or 1767, where a church was built. Now, it's not like this church here. There is a famous photograph in Bigger's book, but it's of this church. You know, it's not of the original. Maybe if you can see it there, Canyons. If you go on Google and Google William Orr, you'll probably see this is Joseph Francis Bigger's church, and this is basically this church here. If you look at the windows, you know, it's not the original. But he was writing 100 years after it happened, when the original was long gone. So, as I said, during William Orr's time, Reverend Adam Hill was the minister here. Up at Ballyclare was the Reverend Foot Marshall. Both of these ministers had a good relationship with each other. Both were then implicated in the United Irishman Rebellion, and we'll tell you more at the graveside about that. Adam Hill was one of many ministers that came from Ralstown area, and nearly all of them went into the United Irishman, and they don't all stay in Ralstown. They felt it all around the country, but certainly that area has a big say, and they must have had a couple of classical schools in Ralstown at the time, where then sent people across to Glasgow, University of Glasgow, to get matriculated in theology. So another minister we have to really remember when we're talking about William Orr is the Reverend William Staveley. He grew up next to William Orr's farm in Antrim Town. He was minister of Knockbracken in Belfast and Kells Water in Kells. That's where he's buried today, in Kells. But if it wasn't for William Staveley and a man called Reverend John McKinley, the church wouldn't be as strong as today. Basically, they rearranged, reorganized the Presbyterian Church, the Reformed Presbyterian Church and non-subscribing Presbyterian Church in the north here, and it went from 3 congregations to 30 within 25 years. So Reverend John McKinley said there, he was primarily responsible for the growth in Presbyterianism in this part of the country. But he was one of them big firebrand ministers. People come from miles around. There's people. He did a service outside Ballyclare, I think it was 1791, and we have people writing notes from Ballymoney saying they went to and seen this big preacher in Ballyclare and praying, and then they brought him over to Ballymoney, and then he went to Ballykelly. This was a really good speaker here, you know, not like me. But 1792 came. He said a couple of controversial sermons. He got in bother with the authorities. He became a United Irishman. Was imprisoned for 6 months. He survived the imprisonment for 6 months, for a really dark, dingy place to go. Prison back then, you know. 1792, he did another speech outside Ballymoney. Heard that the authorities were coming for him. He went to Ballykelly. He did a big speech in Ballykelly, the sermon there, and he quickly jumped into the foul on the boat, went across to America. And in America, he was one of these Enlightenment figures as well. In America, he did the big crusade up and down the East Coast, preaching anti-slavery. and then back over there he reformed the Presbyterian Church into this great movement that it then became. But he's actually one of my heroes, to be honest with you, Reverend John McKinley. But William, he was lying in jail for about 4 months, and then they had a trial for him in Carrickfergus. The trial, it was a mock trial. The jury was supplied with drink. They were paid money to badmouth him. There was two Tay Fencibles that came to give evidence against him. One of the Tay Fencibles' evidence was so abrupt, so stupid that it was just thrown out. Even the drunk people could see it was stupid, it was thrown out. But a man called Wheatley, his evidence stuck, and he basically said that William Marr had signed him in, had given him those of allegiance outside Antrim town the previous summer. That was okay. He was then sentenced to death, right? So he was waiting. Then he had a period of 6 weeks waiting. Every week, the letter came from Belfast, giving him a reprieve. At this time, there was no other public court had sentenced a man to death for being a United Irishman. William Marr was the first. He got a reprieve, got another reprieve. That morning, on today, 250 years ago, 225 years, he was waiting. They were waiting for a carriage from Belfast with another reprieve that didn't come. And that's when it dawned on him, I'm going to die here. So he wrote down his final notes, which we're going to see here in Tipplepatrick. And you'll get that read out. So on the way to the gallows, he got into this wee coach. Now, Adam Hill was his confidant for the previous couple of weeks. Adam Hill was in with him, giving prayers, being his confidant. But into the coach came Reverend Adam Hill and Reverend William Staley. And what happened? He got up to try and give him a speech, but the two managed to maybe sit down there, which is very uncool. To be honest with you, I think anybody would do, any normal person would do anyway. But he was hanged then. He was taken here, as I said. It was totally illegal to have a wake back then. That any traders having a wake and the yeomanry were coming from. There was a yeoman barracks about a mile past the Church of Ireland. It's still there. The doors were shut in the barracks. The yeoman didn't come out, which is very unwell for the yeomanry in this area here. I was asked the other day, why didn't the yeoman come out? Why did they close the doors? And someone else said that, well, the yeoman back then was called the Orange Yeomanry, but the Orange Order hadn't infiltrated places like Ballinger, Ballyclare, because it was predominantly Presbyterian towns. So the yeomanry was picked from there were a lot of Presbyterians in the yeomanry in Ballyclare, Ballinger. So that's why they closed the doors, they wouldn't come out. So the next morning, they had to send yeomen from Belfast and Blair's camp up to here to put down the wake and the subsequent procession to Tipplepatrick. But as I said, the British government banned all wakes, and his body was taken not into the church, the previous church to this, which was at a different angle to this church here. Now, it's taken here, it was put into the minister's room where it was dressed, and it was said, Bigger says that the elders from all over the north came to pay their respects. This was a United Irishman, but he was also a Mason. He was high up in Mason, as all the Rs, near all the Rs were, So it didn't really matter if they didn't know the fella. You came to pay your respects. He's the only person ever as such yet to be hanged as a United Irishman. There was a rising in March 1797 in Fermanagh and Tyrone. That was quickly put down, but there was no trials. Those people were hacked to death. In 6 months previous, the Louth militia, 38 members of them were killed for being a United Irishman. Later on, after our death, we'll have the Monaghan militia. There was 13 of them who put to death. I was 13 or 16 who put to death for being a United Irishman. So he was the first martyr. He was put to death by the government at a public trial. So that's where you get William Marr, the first martyr. So the church here was totally filled. Adam Hill, Reverend Staley, this wouldn't have been his church, and it wouldn't have been his real faith, for this was looked to conform to Westminster Confession of Faith. and he was a Reformed Presbyterian church. But they held a service here all night, and it says that the church was packed the whole night, and people came from miles around to pay their respects and to guard the church. People all around guarding the church, so no one would come in to claim the body, get the body. The British didn't come to put it down, get the body. So the next morning comes, and they're going to have this big procession over to Antrim Town, sorry, not Antrim, to Tumblepatrick, where we will pick it up at some odd point. So now I'm going to hand over to where is it? Mark. He's going to play us we did Russell. But I suppose before that there, as Arlene said, back then the people of this area would have been very Ulster Scots in language, and it wouldn't be right not to bring it up with what we're on today and over the last 10 years. Ulster Scots language has been put really to the forefront, and it should be, for this is the way we spoke 200 years ago, you know. So Alan Miller is going to talk to us after that there, after Mark's, and he won a prize last year at the Lindenhall Library Prize for Ulster Scots poetry. So we better treat him coming and give him this few words, you know. So I'm going to hand over to Mark here, okay?
Thank you, Stephen. I'm just going to speak briefly from the women's point of view. The United Irishmen were very committed to their ideals, and they suffered and indeed died for their cause. And once they were hanged, that was the end of their story. But behind them were their wives, who were in a quietly supportive role. They had to hold together a family home, mind the children, really provide some sort of anchor for their husband in very troubled times indeed, very troubled social times as well. And such was the case of Isabella Orr, William's wife, who, whenever he was executed, then she was left with 4 young children, expecting her 5th, with her house looted and burned. So really just briefly remember the suffering that the women who were left behind had to go through and had to continue to go through for the rest of their lives as well. So I'm just going to play a piece that all of these women would have known, a Robbie Burns song called Banks of Doon, and it was written in 1791, and very much these people this would have been the popular music of the day. The new music of Robert Burns would have travelled far and wide, and it was as popular in Ulster as it was in Scotland. So before I play the tune, I'll just read some of the words that are quite relevant. Ye banks and braes o' bonny Doon, how can ye bloom so fresh and fair? How can ye chant, ye little birds, I so weary, full of care? Thou'll break my heart, thou waddling bird, that wantons through the flooring thorn. Thou minds me of departed joys, departed never to return.
My name's Alan Miller. I'm a journalist, poet and writer, and I'm specifically interested in Ulster Scots writing and poetry, but also writing in English as well. And I've written long poems on James Campbell, the Bard of Ballymuir, and this was his church here. Not this building, but he would have been in this church in the sense of the congregation back in the day. And he was born, there's two main, I'm here to talk about two main Ulster Scots poets who were United Irishmen, United Irish revolutionaries. James Orr from Ballycarrig and James Campbell, as I said, from Ballymuir. Ireland in the late 18th century was very repressive, and the Protestant radicals on their own had been trying to do reforms for decades, and then suddenly the penny dropped that if they got Catholics in too, then there'd be such a force of numbers that the aristocrats could be booted out. But that all went well. They started doing trying to set up democratic structures, but these were crushed in March 1793, and after that it was just repression straight through to the rebellion. And James Orr and James Campbell got caught up in all of this, as did William Orr, who we are remembering here today. It's not clear when either of them joined up or became an organisation, but it is clear that they were both out fighting in 1798. And so what I'd like to do is read a poem by James Orr, and then another poem, a what-if poem by myself. Orr was born in 1770 to a weaver, and he was a weaver, one of the weaver poets. Not all the Ulster Scots poets were weavers, but these two were. And Ballycarrig, he was one of the leaders in Ballycarrig. He was a 50-pounder after the Revolution. He had to flee to America, where he lived for several months. And then I think that his father was poorly, so he came back to Ireland then, and that's where he lived, and he died in about 1816. Campbell was born in 1757 in Cairncastle, and then he came over here to the Ballymuir area to get work as a weaver and a farmer, and he set up house with his wife, who was a steward, at Ballybracken, and he had a large family. Campbell, I think that Orr would be very much into the intellect and the intellectual ideas of the revolution, or the United Irishmen, but I think Campbell would have been more, far more socialist, well, more grassroots gut socialist, as opposed to thinking a lot of intellectual thoughts about things. He'd been very visceral, I think. Campbell, he was described as middle stature, of firm build, very active in youth, and personally brave. And he probably was an Antrim. I don't think James Orr got to Antrim on the battle day, but Campbell probably, as he was in the force, was an Antrim. And he died in the spring of 1818, and was buried at a huge Masonic funeral in the graveyard there, where we'll be going next. Campbell best reflects the attitude within Presbyterian communities after the failed rebellion, in my view. He doesn't say much about it. He doesn't try to glorify what happened. He doesn't try to remember it. And he only remembers this short verse. In '98 we armed again to right some things we thought were wrong. We got so little for our pains, it's now worth minding in a song. So that reflects the drift away from that. And Orr, on the other hand, wrote many poems about the rebellion. He wrote Donegal Hill, which I mentioned on the last Antrim, on actually the Battle of Antrim day a few months ago, where his experience of that day and his description of people on the day, the character, people watching, all the nuances all the time were all recorded in that poem. It's a brilliant poem. And also his experience of being on the run himself was recorded in The Wanderer. And also the passengers, the first part of the passengers explains how he left his home with sadness to go to the ship to